Before we dive into what really happens behind locked steel doors, make sure you hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and leave a comment. What you're about to hear isn't speculation, it's the hidden machinery of a system that feeds over 40,000 inmates a day, and almost no one outside Japan has ever seen how it truly works. The morning began with a siren, then silence. Rain misted over the high concrete walls of Fuchu Prison, Japan's largest correctional facility, a place known not for violence or chaos, but for its order. The vast compound looked quiet from a distance, but inside, long before the inmates woke, something urgent had already unfolded. At 4:52 a.m., a kitchen supervisor named Tanaka stood frozen in front of a stainless steel preparation table. The steam rising from simmering miso vats blurred his glasses as he inspected a batch of vegetables that had arrived moments earlier from a regional processing center. Each crate was supposed to match strict inventory records, but one crate didn't. Its label was wrong. The seal was different. And inside was a mix of ingredients that didn't belong in any approved menu. Tanaka knew this wasn't a simple packaging error. Japan's correctional meal system was one of the most rigidly controlled in the world. Every vegetable, grain, and protein that entered the prison kitchens passed through a chain of documentation. A mislabel was unusual. A crate containing unauthorized ingredients was unheard of. What alarmed him more was the possibility of contamination, not because of deliberate harm, but because a single mistake in a system this large could trigger a nationwide review. Feeding 40,181 prisoners across Japan required coordination between dozens of regional food centers, hundreds of officers, and strict nutritional guidelines approved by the Ministry of Justice. One bad ingredient could halt morning meals across multiple facilities. He picked up the crate and opened the logbook. The barcode didn't match any supplier. The delivery timestamp had been manually written, another red flag. For a prison environment built on precision, these were not small errors. They were warnings. Before Tanaka could escalate the issue, the floor supervisor entered. Officer Ishikawa had worked the kitchens for 15 years, long enough to know that any disruption to breakfast, the anchor of the prison's daily timetable, would trigger delays across the entire institution. Delays meant confusion. Confusion meant risk. Even in a country known for its discipline, prison administrators avoided unpredictable situations at all costs. "What's the problem?" Ishikawa asked. Tanaka explained quickly, showing him the mislabeled crate. Ishikawa's jaw tightened. "We follow procedure. Secure that crate. Don't touch anything else." He radioed the command office. Within minutes, 2 administrative inspectors arrived, not guards but bureaucrats trained to trace supply chain irregularities. They photographed the crate, tagged it, and sealed it in an evidence room. Not criminal evidence, procedural evidence. Japan's inmate meal system was not widely known outside academic circles, but it was one of the most meticulously documented institutional supply networks on Earth. Every food item was tracked from farm to cutting board. Every calorie was counted. Every ingredient had to meet strict nutritional targets designed to maintain inmate health at the lowest possible cost. An error in the chain wasn't treated as a crime, but it was treated with the seriousness of one. While inspectors worked, the prison continued its routine. Metal doors unlocked across the facility, echoing down hallways like muted thunder. Inmates rose from their futons, lined up silently, and prepared for the day's first meal. None of them knew that the kitchens had barely avoided a disruption. The scene shifted to the regional processing center 50 kilometers away. Rows of conveyor belts carried vegetables through automated washers, cutters, and packagers. Supervisors reviewed computer screens filled with numbers, delivery times, weight logs, and distribution assignments for different prisons across the Tokyo region. The center's director, Hashimoto, reviewed the overnight dispatch records. Everything appeared correct. No anomalies, no missing crates, no misplaced shipments. But when he reached the section labeled Fuchu Prison, Batch 1, he froze. The outbound log showed 28 crates. The inbound confirmation from Fuchu showed 29. That meant the prison had received a crate the center never sent. Hashimoto replayed surveillance footage from the loading dock. Delivery trucks were loaded by automated systems, weighed and sealed. Nothing unusual. But he watched the recording again. And again. Something subtle nagged at him, a crate on the far left side of the pallet that didn't look like the others. He zoomed in. The crate was identical in shape, but its serial code was slightly misaligned, almost invisible to an untrained eye. The packing label was the right color but the wrong type of adhesive. It was small but clear. The crate had not come from their facility. Hashimoto picked up his phone and called the Ministry of Justice Logistics Bureau. His voice remained calm, but his hands trembled slightly. In 20 years he had never seen an unexplained addition to a prison food shipment. Back at Fuchu, inspectors completed their initial assessment of the suspicious crate. No hazardous materials. No spoiled food. No foreign objects. The ingredients inside, cabbage, onions, lotus root, were ordinary. But their origins were not logged in the National Supply Database. By 7:30 a.m., breakfast was served on schedule. Rice, miso soup and pickled vegetables. Simple, balanced and portioned precisely according to regulations. The inmates filed in, ate quietly and left for their assigned duties. The morning proceeded without incident. But in the administrative wing, the investigation widened. Calls went out to other prisons, asking whether anyone else had received extra crates. None had. Fuchu was the only facility affected. The working theory was simple but troubling, a supply chain error. But as one inspector reviewed the contents again, he noticed something strange in the bottom corner of the crate. A thin strip of paper, nearly invisible, tucked beneath a layer of lotus root. He pulled it out with tweezers. The others leaned in as he unfolded it. It wasn't a note. It was a receipt. A small, faded receipt printed in Japanese, from a grocery store in Saitama, timestamped 2 days earlier. That store had nothing to do with the correctional system. The inspectors exchanged glances. This wasn't a criminal act, but it was a breach. A hole in a system that wasn't supposed to have holes. Ishikawa, the veteran officer, exhaled slowly. Someone put this crate in the delivery stream manually, he said. But why? And how did it reach us without anyone noticing? The room fell silent. Because if someone could add one crate, they could add anything. And no one knew how long it had been happening. But when the inspectors checked the supply logs for the previous month, the pattern they found changed everything. The receipt lay on the stainless steel table like a whisper of something that shouldn't exist. A tiny scrap of paper with a faded timestamp from a grocery store that had no connection to any prison supply network in Japan. The inspectors stared at it in silence. For a moment, the blue fluorescent lights above them hummed louder than the conversation they couldn't yet have. Officer Ishikawa finally broke the stillness. "Run the logs again," he said, voice low. "Every shipment from the past 30 days. We need to know if this crate was a one-time slip, or the beginning of a breach we've been blind to." The administrative team moved quickly. Their work rarely involved suspense, but today the tension felt like a string pulled tight. The prison kitchen, normally a rhythmic world of knives, rice cookers and precise routines, seemed to hold its breath. In the records room, Inspector Nato pulled out box after box of shipment logs. Each folder was filled with carefully stamped papers, delivery times, crate weights, supplier IDs. Everything should have been uniform. Perfect. Predictable. But as they compared the digital entries to the physical paperwork, something subtle began to appear. A pattern, not loud or obvious but unsettling in its quiet consistency. Every few days a crate arrived with a weight variance of less than 1 kilogram. Not enough to trigger the automated flags. Not enough to look suspicious. But just enough to suggest the crate wasn't identical to its listed counterpart. No one had noticed. Until now. Nato exhaled sharply. These aren't random errors. Someone knew the threshold. They stayed just under it. Ishikawa rubbed his forehead. Whoever did this understands our protocol. That's the part that worries me. The inspectors spread the logs across a long meeting table. Under the cold blue lights, red ink circles began to form a rhythm. A pattern. A timeline. Every irregular crate had arrived on the same delivery route, the Tokyo to Fuchu line. The same distributor. The same vehicle type. The same guard rotation at the receiving dock. But the contents themselves? Always harmless. Always ordinary. Vegetables. Root crops. Nothing that looked dangerous. It was the origin that made them dangerous. Because the more they looked, the clearer it became. Some crates had joined the supply stream without ever passing through regulated channels. Someone was inserting them manually. And that meant someone had physical access to the supply chain. By noon, the Ministry of Justice liaison arrived. A man named Kato, calm and analytical, the kind of official who rarely reacted outwardly. He studied the logs, studied the crate, studied the receipt. Then he said, "This is no longer an internal concern. We need to involve the Regional Supply Bureau." But before they could make the call, something else happened. Down in the kitchen, as workers cleaned the preparation area, a junior staff member found something at the bottom of the stainless steel waste bin. A scrap of blue fiber, thin, smooth, synthetic. Not from a vegetable bag. Not from any kitchen uniform. He handed it to Tanaka, who held it up to the light. The fiber shimmered slightly as if it were part of high-quality fabric. Something used in industrial uniforms. Or perhaps, transportation gear. The inspectors added it to the growing collection of anomalies. It wasn't much, but it reinforced their fear. Someone had physically handled the crate in a place and manner that didn't match any official record. When they replayed the prison's loading dock footage, grainy, blue-tinted, they noticed something that made the room go quiet. The delivery truck arrived at 5:12 a.m. The driver signed the entry log. Officers checked the seals. The crates were unloaded one row at a time. But on the left side of the screen for less than 2 seconds the camera caught something odd. A shadow moving near the back corner of the truck. It wasn't shaped like an officer, and it wasn't in the timing of any required movement. It looked like someone stepped down from the rear side, but the silhouette vanished too quickly to confirm. Ishikawa leaned closer, squinting. Who is that? And why aren't they in any of the logs? They enhanced the footage, as much as the aging system allowed. The figure remained blurred, their features lost in the compression. But the outline was unmistakable. Someone had been inside the truck who shouldn't have been. And the angle of their descent matched exactly where the suspicious crate had been stacked. The kitchen supervisor murmured, "This isn't a contamination issue. Someone inserted that crate personally." Kato looked at the timestamp again. And they did it in under 3 seconds. The question now wasn't how the crate got in. It was who had done it without alerting a single guard or triggering a single alarm. Meanwhile, at the Regional Processing Center, Director Hashimoto continued digging through surveillance footage. He rewound the cameras on the day the Fuchu shipment left. Every crate entering the automated line was scanned, weighed, labeled, and recorded by machines. All except one. One crate entered from the far left loading lane, a lane that was supposed to be shut down for maintenance that morning. A lane with no operator assigned. A lane that hadn't been used in months. He called the maintenance supervisor. "Was lane 4 locked this week?" "Yes," the man answered. "Fully shut down." "Then how," Hashimoto said slowly, "did it supply a crate that ended up at Fuchu prison?" A chill ran through the room. Back at Fuchu, the inspectors compiled the anomalies into a single report. A pattern was emerging, not of sabotage, not of violence, but of infiltration. Someone was interacting with the prison food supply chain without authorization, inserting harmless crates to mask their presence. But why? The answer arrived unexpectedly, in the form of a phone call from the ministry's logistics bureau. They had searched a government contractor database, cross-referencing uniform fibers with known suppliers. The blue fiber found in the waste bin came from a discontinued model of delivery jacket used 5 years ago by a private trucking subcontractor. One that had gone bankrupt. Only 3 jackets from that line had never been returned. 3 uniforms. 3 possible individuals. All unaccounted for. As the inspectors processed this information, a courier arrived with the morning's external mail. Inside a plain envelope, addressed anonymously to the Fuchu Administrative Office, was a single sheet of paper, printed, not handwritten. It contained a list of dates. Every date matched one of the irregular crate deliveries from the past month. At the bottom was a single line. "You are looking in the wrong place." The room fell silent. Even the humming lights seemed to pause. And Inspector Nato whispered the thought everyone else was afraid to say aloud. If these crates weren't about getting something in, were they about testing how easy it is to get something out? Because if someone could slip a harmless crate into the system, they might be preparing for something far more serious. And when the inspectors checked the next scheduled delivery route, they saw a change no one had authorized. A route diversion that made no sense at all. Morning in Japan's correctional system doesn't begin with the sound of cell doors, or the echo of boots on concrete. It begins in the kitchens, massive, industrial-sized facilities where the meals for more than 40,000 inmates nationwide must be prepared with precision, consistency, and strict government oversight. For many people on the outside, a prison kitchen might look like a rough environment, loud, chaotic, or disorderly. But in Japan, the reality is the exact opposite. Everything is designed with a level of structure and discipline that reflects the larger culture of the country's correctional approach. The kitchens are not places of conflict, they are places of routine. Before the first trays are filled, the morning shift staff arrive to perform safety checks. Equipment logs are reviewed, temperatures are recorded, and stainless steel surfaces must pass hygiene inspections before any food preparation can begin. Nothing is rushed. Nothing is improvised. Inside these kitchens, the environment is surprisingly quiet. Steam drifts upward from massive rice cookers. Pressure simmer kettles hum softly, producing warm air that contrasts with the cold steel surroundings. Workers, some civilian staff, some inmates on assigned duty, move in steady, synchronized patterns. Each person has a defined role and each action follows procedure. One group focuses exclusively on the rice, the foundation of nearly every meal. Another team prepares the protein dishes, which change depending on the day, small servings of fish, tofu, or chicken. Vegetables are washed, chopped, and portioned with speed and accuracy. Everything, from the angle of the knife to the placement of a tray on the metal counter, follows a practiced routine. The aroma in the kitchen is mild but warm: rice, soy-based broth, and simple vegetables. Nothing extravagant, yet everything has purpose. Every gram of food is measured. Every ingredient is logged. Each batch must match the nutritional guidelines set by the Ministry of Justice. Inmates assigned to the kitchen take their roles seriously. The environment isn't lenient. Mistakes are corrected immediately, not with aggression, but with instruction. These positions are seen as responsibilities that help maintain order and routine. For some, working in the kitchen becomes one of the few structured activities available during their sentence. Something that gives them a rhythm, a sense of time, and a break from isolation. But the most interesting part isn't the preparation, it's the system of timing. Every meal in Japan's prisons is synchronized with incredible accuracy. A delay of even 10 minutes could disrupt the entire facility's daily schedule. That means the kitchen teams operate according to the minute: when to stir, when to load, when to portion, when to distribute. Trays slide down the production line like clockwork. Each one must look nearly identical. Workers ladle rice into the center of compartments, place a measured amount of vegetables into another, and carefully portion out the protein item of the day. In some facilities, soups are poured into sealed containers so they can be delivered without spilling during transport. By the time everything is ready, tall metal carts are loaded with hundreds of trays. The carts are locked to prevent spills and contamination, then rolled toward distribution points. This process is not hurried. It's deliberate, controlled, and overseen by staff who verify everything from tray count to temperature logs. What surprises many outsiders is the balance between strictness and order. It's not chaotic. It's not dramatic. It's meticulous. The Japanese correctional system is built around structure, and the kitchen reflects that more than any other part of daily operations. As the carts roll out toward the housing blocks, the kitchen slowly resets. Counters are wiped. Floors are washed. Logs are filled out. The quiet returns. It is a cycle repeated 3 times a day, every day for tens of thousands of inmates across the country. And behind the scenes, this routine, clean, measured, and controlled, is what keeps the entire system running. Before the investigators even stepped inside the administrative wing, the air felt different. The usual rhythm of the prison, distant footsteps, the rolling of metal carts, the soft mechanical hum of industrial steamers, had faded into an unnatural quiet. Something was wrong long before anyone said it out loud. Detective Arai and Officer Nakamura exchanged a silent glance as they crossed the long blue-lit corridor leading to the logistics office. A stack of sealed files lay waiting on the desk, but the tension in the room wasn't from paperwork. It was from the empty seat behind it. The chief supply officer, the man responsible for overseeing every gram of food distributed to the 40,000 inmates across the region, was nowhere to be found. His shift had started at 6 a.m. He had never missed a day in 12 years. And now he was gone. Arai lifted the top file, flipping through the contents. Inventory logs, he muttered. Perfect handwriting. Exact quantities. But then he paused. On 2 of the pages, small discrepancies. Not enough to suggest theft, not enough to suggest incompetence, just enough to suggest something wasn't adding up. That's twice this month, Nakamura whispered. Do you think he did this intentionally? Arai didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence was already loud enough. Behind them, a correctional officer entered the room. Detective, he said quietly, we found something. The storage room was cold, colder than the rest of the facility. Blue LED strips lined the ceiling, reflecting across the steel shelving. What should have been a straightforward, sterile environment suddenly felt like the center of a puzzle. A box sat on the floor, left open. Inside were sealed meal tray lids with faded marker labels. Someone had written dates that didn't match any official logs. And tucked beneath them, a folded slip of paper. Arai opened it carefully. Numbers. Rows of them. Not amounts of food. Not inventory counts. They were ID numbers. Inmate ID numbers. They matched the individuals transferred from other prefectures this month. Nakamura said, scanning them. Transfers, sudden ones. Transfers that had happened without warning. Transfers that someone might have used to bury a pattern. Arai exhaled slowly. Whoever wrote this didn't want to hide a mistake, he said. They wanted someone to find it. The question was, why? They moved next to the surveillance hub, where monitors displayed various parts of the facility. Rooms bathed in cold blue lighting, hallways where movement looked like shadows sliding across glass, the endless flow of meal carts and staff. The guard on duty rewound the footage to the night before. They watched the supply officer enter the storage room at 2143. He looked calm, steady. He placed the marked box where the detectives later found it. Then he stepped out of the frame. He did not return. No one followed him. No one approached. No one looked suspicious. It was as if he had walked out of the building and vanished into thin air. What was he trying to expose? Nakamura murmured. The guard clicked to another angle, one covering the main corridor. The officer appeared again, walking toward the eastern gate. Then something unusual happened. A figure stepped into view. Not threatening. Not aggressive. Not running. Just standing there. Waiting. Wearing a blue maintenance uniform identical to hundreds inside the facility. Their face stayed out of frame, just barely hidden by the angle. The supply officer slowed. The two exchanged a short conversation, only seconds long. No gestures. No agitation. Just words. Then the supply officer followed the unknown figure through a service hallway. And neither appeared in any camera afterward. Arai leaned back. Someone knew the blind spots. Someone inside, Nakamura added. The realization settled heavily in the room. This wasn't about food. This wasn't about scheduling or miscalculated numbers. This was about access. Someone was slipping through the system using the most overlooked part of the prison's daily operations, food distribution, to move unseen. Not to harm. Not to smuggle. But to hide something deeper. Arai studied the footage again, replaying the moment the supply officer hesitated before following the unknown staff member. There was no fear in his expression. Only resolve. As if the missing officer had decided to step into something he had been investigating on his own. Something he believed was worth the risk. That afternoon, the investigators interviewed kitchen workers, logistics staff, delivery personnel, everyone who might have had contact with the officer. Every answer was the same. No conflicts, no complaints, no arguments, no suspicious behavior. But one detail stood out. A kitchen supervisor mentioned that the officer had requested access to transfer logs the week before. Something completely outside his usual duties. He had asked politely but insistently. He had been looking for someone. Or something. Arai felt that familiar pull, the sense that the truth was close enough to breathe but still hiding in the gaps between facts and procedure. He returned to the evidence table and unfolded the slip of paper again. Inmate ID numbers. All transferred suddenly. All within 2 months. All to different facilities. Why these inmates? He whispered. Nakamura scanned the list again. Wait, these numbers aren't random. Look. Arai leaned in. Each ID belonged not just to a transferred inmate, but to inmates who had worked in food processing assignments before their transfer. Every single one. A chill ran through the room that had nothing to do with the cold lighting. The supply officer hadn't been exposing food irregularities. He had been tracking people. People who moved through the system quietly. People who might have seen something. People who might have known something. And whoever stood in that blind surveillance corner the night before, they were part of it. Arai closed the file slowly. Someone inside this system, he said, has been removing anyone who knows the truth. The weight of the statement settled between them. Because whatever that truth was, it was big enough that the supply officer risked everything to reveal it. And now he was gone. But the real breaking point came minutes later, when Nakamura opened the bottom drawer of the officer's desk. Inside was a sealed envelope addressed to the next person who finds this. Arai tore it open. What he read inside stopped him cold. A single line. If you're reading this, you already know who to look for. But there was no name. No clue. No signature. Just a final line at the bottom. Check the basement records. Arai stared at the words. The basement was restricted. The basement was locked. The basement was where outdated records and sealed archives were stored. Archives tied to old cases, old investigations, and old secrets. Secrets someone clearly didn't want reopened. He closed the envelope. We go to the basement, he said. And the moment he said it, the hallway lights flickered, just once, casting the entire corridor into a deeper shade of blue. Almost like a warning. The basement door groaned open, the kind of sound old buildings made when they were trying to hide something. A cold draft drifted out, carrying the faint smell of paper and steel. Detective Arai stepped inside first, his flashlight cutting through the dim blue emergency lights. Officer Nakamura followed, shutting the door. The lock clicked, small but echoing. Shelves stretched out like a maze of forgotten history, boxes, crates, binders. Some new, some untouched for years. The lights flickered softly, casting slow-moving shadows. "This place shouldn't be this cold," Nakamura whispered. Arai agreed. Archives were supposed to feel stuffy, never refrigerated. 10 minutes in, Arai stopped. A narrow row of shelves stood slightly out of place, dust disturbed at the base. One binder lay crooked. He pulled it free. Kitchen assignment rosters, 12 years. Nakamura frowned. That's the supply officer's whole career. Arai opened it. Pages of inmate kitchen assignments filled the binder. Some names crossed out. Some highlighted in blue. They recognized the highlighted IDs, they matched the slip of paper. These inmates were transferred suddenly, Nakamura said. All under the supply officer. Notes in the margins read, "Not random. Transferred quickly. Patterns repeating. Someone is choosing them." Arai felt a chill. This isn't about missing food. It's about who's preparing it. They moved deeper and found newer boxes marked with red stickers. Inside were rotation logs and transfer sheets. Many inmates had been reassigned abruptly, far quicker than normal cycles. Arai saw the pattern. These sudden transfers all happened after inmates flagged small errors. They weren't errors, Nakamura said. They noticed something. The last box was full of handwritten notes, internal memos and confidential logs. Multiple prisons reported the same transfer patterns over the years. It wasn't about food. It was about protecting something, or someone, inside the system. Arai found a folder labeled Interview Notes. Staff and inmate statements. Some unsigned. One note stood out. Inmate claims staff member accessed restricted logistics corridors. No official record. Another. Same uniform seen but different height/body each time. A uniform being used to move undetected, Nakamura murmured. A final page matched the handwriting from upstairs. If I disappear, the answer is in the staff rotation files. An arrow pointed to a shelf on the far right. That shelf held one lonely binder, placed perfectly in the center. Arai stepped toward it, but then footsteps echoed above them. The lights flickered. Arai and Nakamura exchanged a glance. Someone else was in the building. Arai grabbed the binder. "We're leaving." The footsteps shifted, slow, deliberate. At the door, silence. They stepped into the hallway. Empty. Whoever was up there had vanished into the same blind spot the supply officer followed before he disappeared. "This isn't over," Arai said. "It's barely started," Nakamura replied. Back at headquarters, analysts tore through the binder. The findings were immediate. One staff ID appearing in multiple prisons. Overlapping schedules impossible for a single person. Unexplained access logs. Identical maintenance uniforms assigned repeatedly. Someone had built an identity that could move anywhere. Not an outsider. Someone inside the system. Someone using kitchen assignments, the most overlooked labor detail, to stay invisible. Arai finally understood. The supply officer had uncovered a systemic blind spot. Someone exploiting routine. Someone hiding in plain sight. The binder wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Trace every facility this staff ID accessed, Arai ordered. Check their meal distribution corridors. Because the truth about the missing officer, and the transferred inmates, lay in places no one ever checked. The quiet rhythm of food processing, the blue-lit corridors beneath an ordinary day. As Arai stepped into the cool evening air, he realized the case was now national. It wasn't about one missing officer. It was about a shadow moving through the system. And now that shadow knew someone was following. The prison's blue lights glowed behind him, silent and waiting. "If you think this story was intense," he said softly, "you're not ready for the next one."